Okay, namaste. Thank you for joining in this class on Kala Sarpa. And the timings have shifted a bit because of the beginning of Satyam Shivam Sundaram. And from now on, we'll be having this class at 9 o'clock every Saturday because Satyam Shivam Sundaram starts from uh, 7 o'clock. So this has been shifted, keeping in mind regarding that class. Okay, so in the last class, we had covered about Rahu in the 8th house. Today, we'll be looking at Rahu in the today we'll be looking at the other end of the axis, that is Ketu in the 2nd house. Okay, and that gives us a lot of, Ketu in the 2nd house has a lot of insights for us. Okay, but before we begin, let's start with the daily Shanti mantra of the Upanishads. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunakatu Sahaviryankar Vavahai Tejasvinadadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So Ketu in the 2nd house, and we know that 2nd house rules the eyes and the mouth, and it also rules vision, diet, and speech. So, because Ketu reflects ambivalence at best and apathy at worst, so in the 2nd house, it suggests a native who is careless about what goes into his or her mouth. Okay, and this can indicate a poor diet or substance abuse in the form of tobacco, alcohol, recreational drugs, or pharmaceutical prescriptions. Okay, and physically there may be numbness or little sensation in the mouth, for example an inability to taste flavors and appreciate the pleasures of food and drink. And consequently the native may be very fond of spices, for example curry, garlic, ginger, or pepper, to add some amount of zing to his or her favorite dishes. Okay, the 2nd house also rules what comes out of the mouth, for example speech or song or wisdom. Okay, so if this Ketu is malefic, then it suggests some disregard for language or lack of vocal control that can result in poor grammar or using swear words or racial slurs basically. And these people, if Ketu is malefic, they cannot carry a tune singing. Okay, or they also may reflect some kind of sprouting ignorance. Okay, and the native may neglect some aspects of the face, particularly the mouth, teeth, and eyes, or may suffer neglect or deterioration in the form of acne, bad skin, crooked or decayed teeth, eye ailments, chancres on lips and gums, as well as throat ailments. Okay, and if this happens for a female, then the native may neglect certain aspects of her appearance, showing scant regard for appearance or cosmetics or jewelry. Okay, and for both males and females, this is a combination where they may have poor vision and neglect to wear corrective lenses. Okay, and if this is happening particularly for a male, then such a male may display some eccentric facial features of adornments, for example a peculiar beard or goatee or mustache or facial tattoos or unusual ear piercings and so on. Okay, now in case of family, such natives may be ambivalent, okay, about family members, about family history or family values. And these people, they don't always respect notions of family honor and tradition. Okay, and they care much less about what the family has done in the past. Okay, such a native may become separated from his or her family origins, literally. For example, such a native may suffer like being, in a way, like being given up for adoption, or being disowned, or voluntarily leaving the family, or figuratively. Okay, and these people usually have the habit of turning their backs on family wealth, traditions, and values. Okay, uh, Now, there could be something dysfunctional about a family member, okay, with Ketu in the second house, for example, a debilitating mental illness or spiritual detachment or abandonment to a dissolute lifestyle. Or, there could be something very quirky or murky or mysterious or even disreputable about certain aspects of family lineage. For example, paternal legitimacy, financial instability, substance abuse, mental disorders, or even secret marriages. Okay. And since the second house is also an indicator of the second marriage, the native may be ambivalent about the prospect, or, some characteristics, as I said, like, like, having secret marriage or having a disreputable character. Such characteristics may apply to that prospective spouse. Okay. Now, Ketu in the second house is not an impediment to money. Okay. Don't think that Ketu represents impediment to wherever it sits. Okay. But it reflects indifference. Okay. And second house also represents knowledge. Okay. So acquisition of knowledge is regarded in the same way. So unless intellectual brilliance compensates for lack of study, the education may be compromised. Okay. And these natives, they aren't usually interested in material things. So, he or she is not likely a collector or a hoarder or a saver. Rather, these people are more inclined to give things away. Okay. So, poor money management can become a liability, at least in other people's eyes. And since the second house also rules authorship, so Ketu in this position implies carelessness regarding command and control of language. If the native is an aspiring writer, then the native is more likely to compose on his or her own whims rather than via daily discipline to indulge in poetry or lyrics, because they demand less perseverance than longer works like novels, and they are also disinclined to rewrite or edit much. Okay. So it can make a very hodgepodge writer if Ketu is unstable in this position. Okay. So let's look at a few charts having, Rahu in the 8th and the Ketu in the 2nd. Okay. Just let me share my screen. Okay. So I hope everyone can see the screen. Okay. So Brad Pitt, I wanted to take this chart intentionally. Okay. So Brad Pitt is very popular as an American actor and producer who has received multiple nominations and awards from the Hollywood film industry. Okay. And he has been long regarded as an international sex symbol and one of the most handsome men alive. And in his career, he has been romantically linked to several Hollywood luminaries, for example, Juliette Lewis, Grania Davis, Kate Paltrow, Jennifer Aniston, and even Angelina Jolie. Okay. And he was married to and divorced from both Jennifer Aniston as well as Angelina Jolie. And he adopted and fathered twins with Jolie. Okay. So Brad Pitt was a student of journalism and advertising at the University of Missouri. Okay. But he dropped out just 2 weeks before graduating in order to move to Los Angeles in pursuit of an acting career. And after a few years of odd jobs and, bit parts in film and television, Pitt began getting major movie roles in the early 1990s, and he quickly built a career as a reliable star, both on the strength of his striking good looks and his competent acting. Later on, he began taking on the role of film producer. That means he started producing films. Okay. With his wife, Angelina Jolie, he became somewhat of a social activist, contributing and, and supporting certain causes like, like AIDS or prevention of AIDS, stem cell research and humanitarian efforts to help disadvantaged people affected in areas of conflict such as Sudan. Okay. And privately, he is very passionate about architecture and supports initiatives regarding sustainable housing and same-sex marriage. Okay. So in his marital life, several issues have crept in his domestic conflicts that eventually caused him as well as Angelina Jolie to split. Okay, and those issues included substantive, substantive disagreements over their respective styles of child rearing and his alleged heavy use of recreational drugs. Okay, now you look at the chart of Brad Pitt. In his chart, 4 planets occupy the same sign as Ketu, while both Sun and Mars lie outside the degree of the nodal axis. So this is a potential Kala Sarpa, and it is an Anuloma type of yoga with most planets moving towards Rahu. That becomes the initial point of analysis. Okay. So Anuloma, as we know, is the difficult part of Kala Sarpa. And although he was not born under Grahan or an eclipse, it has both the sun and the moon on the nodal axis, okay, which is not desirable for both luminaries. And as a result, it contaminates the nodes also. Okay, and since Mars is also on the nodal axis, it generates a lot of dosha for Kala Sarpa. So Brad Pitt was born into Surya Dasha, Rahu Antar Dasha. So therefore, he was born directly into the karmic path of Kala Sarpa. Okay. Yeah, 7th Lord and 3rd. Yeah, very good observation there. Okay. So, the sun is ordinary in the 2nd house, but it forms a Pravarajya yoga with the moon, Mars, and Mercury. So the 2nd house is under a lot of pressure. Okay. And the notable thing about this cluster is that none of the planets is in close proximity to participate in any kind of Graha Yuddha or even combustion. Okay. But then because this 4-planet combination creates several other yogas. Okay. Pravarajya is a condition where there are more than 3 planets in a single house. Okay. Okay. I'll come to that, Beacon. Okay, I'll come to that. So, as I said, this Pravarajya of 4-planet combination, it is creating several other yogas. For example, the Sun, Moon, and Mars, they are pairing up with each other to form 3 different Raj yogas, while the Moon and Mars additionally form Chandra Mangala yoga. Okay. And again, you look at Moon and Mars, each are combining with the 11th Lord Mercury to form 2 beautiful Dhana yogas. So it explains the financial success that he has had in Hollywood, right? So Rahu is in the 8th house, and it is specially empowered to act on behalf of the 11th Lord Mercury, right? And Mercury is both aspecting Rahu as well as dispositing it by sign. Okay, so Rahu is also in its own nakshatra, which gives it a lot of strength to manifest results for all the positive yogas formed by the planets in the 2nd house that are aspecting Rahu. Okay. Now, Ketu's sign dispositor is Jupiter. It is in its own sign in the 5th. So this is a situation where there is a potential to threaten the well-being of children. And, this jeopardy is made real by the aspects of both Mars and a strong Saturn on Jupiter, which is simultaneously, occupant as well as Lord of the 5th, as well as, the 5th is also the Karaka for children. Okay. So technically speaking, Brad Pitt has only one exaggerated planet, that is his dark moon. Okay. But then you look at Venus, which is barely a few minutes of arc into Capricorn. So, this is an extreme version of Sandhi, which might explain the difficulties he has had in his marital lives, especially because it is afflicted by Saturn in its own sign. Okay. But then you look at Venus. So this Venus assumes greater significance if we note that 3 planets, Mars, Mercury, and Ketu, they are all occupying Purva Ashadha, which is a nakshatra ruled by Venus. Okay. So, 1/3 of all the bhuktis of these planets will see period lords invoking the effect of their nakshatra dispositor Venus and the relevant nakshatra theme. So, Purva Ashadha, it makes you a very cheeky rascal who faces challenges with both women and children. And this is the same theme that unfolded with Brad Pitt and his marital life. Okay. Now, Venus and Saturn, they are lords of the 3, 7th, and 11th houses. That means the Kama houses. And they are together in the Kama house. So this desire, it provokes sex, and relationships. So, Venus-Saturn pair is a classic passion combination on its own. Okay. And similarly, Moon and Mars pair is another, right? But you look at this chart and you will see that Brad Pitt has Mangal Yoga or Mangal Dosha operating from all three reference points. Mars is second from Lagna, Mars is associated with the moon, and 12 from Venus. So, you know, there is a popular rapper's line that 90s kids would be famous, would be familiar with. I got 99 problems, but women ain't one of them. Okay. So he did not have any problem because of women, but then, as he got married, the problems started happening. And you will see that majority of the events in the life of Brad Pitt have occurred in the periods of the nodes, in the periods of planets linked to the nodes or planets in exaggerated condition. Okay. So at the age of 22 to 40, Rahu Dasha produced his fame. And in Rahu, he dropped out of university and moved to Los Angeles to pursue an acting career. Okay. In Rahu Saturn, at the age of 27 to 30, he enjoyed overnight success with his breakout roles in Thelma and Louise, and A River Runs Through It. Okay. In Rahu Mercury, age 30 to 33, he played leading roles in Interview with a Vampire, Legends of the Fall, and 7 and 12 Monkeys. Okay. During Rahu Sun at the age of 36, he married Jennifer Aniston on July 29th, 2000. And, this particular marriage was accompanied by a remarkable pair of coincidences. Jennifer Aniston also has a Kala Sarpa in the chart. And, the marriage took place during a transiting Kala Sarpa configuration. Okay. Now, from the age of 40, Jupiter Dasha brought in a family life period for Brad Pitt because Jupiter is a lord of the second as well as the fifth. So in Jupiter, he divorced Aniston and he started dating Angelina Jolie. Okay. In Jupiter Sun, they were married, and within a space of few years, they had twins of their own, as well as adopting several other children. Okay. In Jupiter Mars, at the age of 52, he was accused by Jolie of bad parenting and excessive drug use, for which she filed a divorce on the 19th of September 2016. Okay, so this is all about Brad Pitt's chart. So next we are looking at Orson Welles. Do you have any questions till this point? So Orson Welles was an American actor, director, writer, and producer who worked in theater, radio, and films. And he had a commendable reputation in all the three fields of work. That means in theater, where he performed Caesar, a Broadway adaptation of Shakespeare's play. In radio, he performed the legendary broadcast of the War of the Worlds, and in film, Citizen Kane, which is constantly ranked as one of the greatest films ever made. Now, Welles had a difficult childhood. He was sickly with some kind of abnormality associated with the spine. His father was a wealthy investor who died an alcoholic. His mother died of hepatitis when he was only 9, and his brother was institutionalized as a schizophrenic. Okay, Welles was talented from a young age, reading by the age of 3, performing magic tricks at 7, lecturing at his local high school at the age of 10. And he also read Shakespeare, wrote poetry and painted. And Orson Welles, he got his start in the theater, but he soon found a more lucrative medium in radio. And by the late 1930s, he was earning up to $2,000 a week in New York for his narration and dramatic roles. And Hollywood took notice, obviously, of his talents and made him an offer he could not refuse, with unprecedented, artistic control for 2 films, one of which was Citizen Kane. Okay. And Welles was a very restless man, both in his personal as well as professional life. He was married 3 times. Okay. Once to actress Rhea Hayworth, and then he also had affairs with many other women. He had a unique vision, however, and he soon chafed at the artistic and financial restrictions Hollywood placed on his later films, ultimately leaving far more unfinished work than he completed. Okay, and towards his latter years, he was reduced to, doing beer and wine commercials in order to finance some of his own films. Okay. Now look at Welles' chart. Orson Welles. So the moon occupies the same sign as Rahu, but it lies just outside the nodal axis. So this is a potential Kala Sarpa. And this is a Viloma type Kala Sarpa with the planets moving towards Ketu. Okay. So, this becomes the initial point of analysis. All right. And with the moon lying on a nodal axis, this is creating a dosha. All right. Welles was born into Mars Dasha and Jupiter Bhukti. Mars has Digbala in the 10th house, where it is forming two Dhana yogas, one with its associate Venus and the other reciprocal aspects with Saturn. Okay. Jupiter is ordinary in the 9th house. All right. And apart from Malavya Yoga, which is formed by Venus, which Dasha he never experienced, Welles has no other major yogas in the chart. Okay. And this is very, very surprising because he had a very meteoric rise to fame. So this is again illustrating the power of Kala Sarpa to elevate a native from ordinary to extraordinary. Okay. Now, Rahu's Rashi dispositor is Saturn, while Saturn is in a Rahu nakshatra. So there is a mutual sambandha between Saturn and Rahu. Okay. And because the 8th and the 9th lord are in proximity, are very close to the ascendant, Saturn's placement is symptomatic of Welles' deeply flawed relationship with his father. Okay. And who was his father? He was a wealthy inventor who divorced his wife when Welles was just 4. Okay. Welles' mother died when he was 9. So for a few years, he was back in his father's care. But then his father was an alcoholic, and it was an open-ended question as to who was taking care of whom. So they lived in they lived a very humble life in their 3 years together, traveling to Asia and elsewhere. So eventually, Welles gave his father an ultimatum, saying that he would leave and never return unless his father stopped drinking. Okay. And a few months later, his father was dead, and Welles always blamed himself, thinking his tough love had hastened his father's end. Okay. Now look at Ketu's dispositor. It is the moon, and the association of moon, which is the 12th lord, with Rahu amplifies some of the contradiction is inherent in the 8th house placement. Okay. So with moon aspecting back into its own house, his voice assumed a characteristic power that served him well in theater and radio. That means he had started getting a baritone in his voice, just like our very own Amitabh Bachchan and Bhupen Hazarika. But then, because it is occupying a Trikasthana, it made him a prodigious drinker, a habit which contributed to his weight. And sometimes, this weight was approaching 275 pounds. So he was really, really fat. Okay. Now, Kala Sarpa has the power to amplify the effects of the exaggerated planets. That's what we learned. And you see, Welles, he had 3 exaggerated planets. The Sun and Venus are both exalted, while Mercury is moderately combust. Okay. And he has a 10th house Venus participating in a Malavya Yoga that gives him extraordinary artistic, talents. And while his Sun in the 11th house allowed him to parlay this into a huge income for the day. Okay. And the 3 of his planets, Mars, Venus, and Ketu, they occupy nakshatras of Mercury. So for a third of all bhuktis, these period lords invoke the effects of their own star lord Mercury, which, as Lagnesh sits in the 11th with an exalted sun, contributed to his creativity, directorial skills, income, and future. Okay. And many of the pivotal events in Welles' life occurred in the periods of the nodes or planets linked to the nodes or planets in the exaggerated condition. All right. So his Rahu Dasha began from the age of 5 to 23. And this was a major life-changing circumstance. Okay. In Rahu Jupiter, when Welles was 9, his mother died. Okay. And in Rahu Saturn, he spent 3 years in his father's care, traveling extensively. Okay. In Rahu Mercury, his old schizophrenic brother was committed to an institution, and his father died the following year. Okay. So during Rahu Ketu, at the age of 16, Welles began his career in stage theater, And during Rahu Venus at the age of 19, he married a socialite. So in 3 back-to-back bhuktis, the sun, the moon, and Mars, his career reached new heights. Okay, he launched a brilliant stage production of Macbeth and Caesar, and independently in his radio career, he was earning around $2,000 a week. And when he was 23, War of the Worlds aired on on national television on 30th of October 1938, and this made his name achieve household recognition. Okay, so during Jupiter Dasha at the age of 23 to 29, he saw a continuation of his career success, a bit with increasingly troubled relationships. Okay, in Jupiter at the age of 24, he was lured to Hollywood by the officer of a lucrative contract and soon divorced. Okay, in Jupiter Saturn at the age of 26, the film Citizen Kane was released, and the following year he was appointed Goodwill Ambassador to South America. Okay, in Jupiter Mercury at the age of 28, he married an actress named Rita Hayworth, and the following year he campaigned on behalf of President Roosevelt's re-election. Okay, so in Jupiter Venus at the age of 32, he divorced Hayworth, and the following year he produced the film Macbeth. Okay, so Saturn Dasha at the age of 39 to 58 saw the winding down or the downfall of his career. In Saturn at the age of 40, he married his third wife, and the film Touch of Evil was released. But after that, his career track was littered with unfinished projects, largely due to monetary problems. Okay, and by Saturn Rahu, he was doing beer and wire commissionals to finance his own movies. Mercury Dasha ran from the age of 58 to his death, and this saw his increasing physical deterioration, okay, compounded by his obesity. He died during Mercury Rahu. Okay, so that's it from me in this class. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Okay, then. I don't think we have doubts. Because Dhanu was saying about last Jyotish Foundation class. Okay, so please go through the recordings to see what she means. Okay. So again, there's an announcement. I'm mentioning it again and again. The Kala Sarpa classes of Saturday, which were originally scheduled at 8 o'clock, have now been shifted to 9 o'clock. That means 1 hour later, due to the starting of the Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Okay, so we'll be meeting every Saturday at this time. All right. So thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon in yet another video. Namaste. Om Gurave Namaha.